I don't own a film camera, but I have plenty of cameras. And all the cameras create stunning, crisp, and vibrant 4K videos. But what if I want that beautiful look that comes from film cameras? And why do we love it so much? Maybe it's the same reason we still love the sounds that come from an old vinyl record player. The subtle scratches of imperfections, the raw sounds that help us feel the music as a tiny needle bounces to the vibrations and converts them to that beautiful vintage sound. Maybe it's the reason we still love these old vehicles. With bodies that bring us to a simpler time, the sensory experience of truly feeling the road underneath us instead of dampening it with new age smooth ride technologies. The train left town this morning, and hearing that engine chug along easily thanks to its simplistic design. Okay, maybe not this engine. This one could use some work. It's the same reason we go out in nature, where we can transport ourselves to a world outside of our stimulation craving society, where we can feel less of the outside world and more of ourselves. Enjoy the scenery around us. Well, there's one common denominator here, and it's the word feel. And I feel like you guys are ready for me to show you how I got that film look on all of those shots. It's called Dehancer. Okay, so I have 5 different shots from that intro sequence. Each one was shot with a different camera. The first one being my Sony a7S III. Then we have the Osmo Pocket 3. Love this little camera. All the gear I use will be linked down below. The next shot is with the Osmo Action 5. Then we have the Insta360 Go 3S. And how I got that clip is pretty hilarious. And then, of course, I had to throw in an iPhone clip. And with each of these clips, we're going to talk about a different section of Dehancer. And you can see that there is a lot going on here. If I was going to talk about every single one in detail, this would be a 3-hour-long tutorial. Instead, we're going to go through, kind of give you the basics of each one. And after watching this, you'll realize why Dehancer is so much more powerful and so much better than just using a film LUT. They just wanted me to give a purely honest review, which I find very admirable. So while you're watching this, if you want to get Dehancer for yourself, use this coupon code, check the link down below, and let's dive in with this first shot. So while I will have a node tree for most of these clips, we're only going to worry about the Dehancer node itself. So I'm going to hit Shift F, and that's going to give me a much larger screen to work with here to color grade off of and keep this effects tab open. So let's start with the input section. This is going to be if you shot on log. I shot on S-Log for this. Essentially, it's a color space transform for whatever you're shooting in. If you're shooting on a more basic camera like the iPhone, or you're shooting on an action camera that's not in any type of log or flat profile, you can just choose your source as Rec 709. The next tab you'll want to go to is the film tab. This is where things get really fun. There are so many different films to choose from, and it's just fun. I can't tell you which one you should use. Each one has a very unique look. Personally, I kept jumping back and forth between the Kodak Portra and the Kodak Visions. Now, I skip over Film Developer, Film Compression, and Expand and go straight to print, because print is really going to change the look of your image. I always went between this 2383 print film and this Endura glossy paper, and you see how much that changes the look of the image. We're still using the same film, but it's printed differently. So once I have my input, my film, and my print selected, that's gonna be the first 3 things I do for any clip. I'm going to go to expand. Now, what this is going to do, if I bring up my scopes here, it's going to change where my bottom end black point is and where my high end white point is. Now, a lot of people learn that you want your white points to be just at the very top here, and you want your black point to be just at the bottom there. While this is a very contrasty look, when you think of film, it's not super contrasty. So I'm going to bring these in a little bit, compress it a little bit more, and that's really going to help convey that film look. So input, film, print, and then expand. And we'll move on to a lot of the other settings with this next clip. So now let's talk about the film developer and the film compression. First off, the film developer. It's pretty much what it looks like. You have your contrast boost, your gamma correction, color boost. This is a great spot. Instead of going to a different node to use saturation before Dehancer, you can come in here and just use the color boost function. Then film compression. This is also going to help compress your highlights and lift up your shadows a little bit. You see the difference when I turn it on and off. Look how much it gets stretched out. It gets super contrasty, not a very filmy look. And with your impact, you can change where it affects those highlights, like at what point on the scopes it's going to start compressing it. And then you have things like color density and tonal range. So with the compression on and off, you can see what a difference it makes. While I do think it looks cool with it off, we're going for a filmy look, and that looks way more filmy. And next we have the color head, a great place to fine tune the colors within your image. As you can see here, I moved this a little bit more towards the yellow, try to give it that warm summertime beachy vibe, but you can also change your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights tone. And for this clip, I didn't have to mess with those at all. I thought it looked great just with the film stock and the type of print that I use. That being said, there were a lot of other clips where I really liked the look, but it wasn't quite there with the colors. So I came down to this color head and got it dialed in exactly where I wanted it. And then the last setting we'll use on this clip is film grain. Pretty cut and dry. You know what film grain is. The higher the ISO, the more grain you're going to have. And each profile has a different type of film grain. It's not just your average LUT slap-on film grain. It really helps sell what type of camera, what type of film you're trying to emulate. And you can see here you have your amount slider. You have many different profiles to choose from. It makes getting that perfect amount of grain super easy. All right, now moving on to this next clip, let's start with halation. Halation's cool. It just makes things look super filmy. And what halation is you see this kind of reddish, I don't want to call it a bloom because we have bloom up next, but you see it just really accentuates your highlights areas, gives it almost a reddish bloom to it. And there's many different settings for halation. That 8mm is going to be a lot stronger than say your 35mm, but we're still getting that little glow around those highlights. It just gives you that dreamy look. And so does bloom. Bloom is going to be essentially blooming your highlights. You can see the change in the image here in the highlight section. Even just around those edges, I'm getting a lot of softness that comes out. And it's just a great way to make your image and your film look a little bit more dreamy. And then moving on to film damage. That's exactly what it sounds like. If you go to the 8mm, it really becomes apparent here. And as I play it back, you'll see all those scratches, all that dust. It's a cool way to sell the effect. Personally, I like to keep this super subtle, but I could definitely see times where I want to overlay something on an older TV and I would crank up the film damage to really sell that effect. For this next one, film breath, we're actually going to go back to our first shot because you can see it a lot easier on a static clip. If I enable film breath, you'll see that there's a little bit of almost a flickering, a quick little color change. The film is essentially kind of having this breathing effect. Super cool. I didn't use it that often. I like it to be a little bit more subtle, but the film breath is definitely a very cool feature that I'll probably be playing with more in the future. And then the next one is gate weave. Think of this, for lack of a better term, as almost a little bit of camera shake. This was a static shot, as you see, nothing's moving. Once I turn that on, we're going to start to get just a little bit of movement, and you can change which profile to create more movement. That's super shaky. Okay, so moving on to the shot with the Go 3S, where I had to shove it in my mouth for that POV, we're going to talk about overscan. Overscan is really cool. I only used it once for this whole entire sequence, but for quick clips and just cool effects, what overscan is essentially adding that whole film frame around your footage. And they have lots of different settings, whether it was shot on a Super 8, which gives you this frame with the perforation there. You've also got Super 35, which I really like, widescreen. Lots of different cool ways to really sell the effect that this was shot on film. And you can even change the perforation mode to positive, which is going to give you those white ones. It's extremely customizable. And now our next section, vignette. I don't feel like that needs too much explanation. You know what a vignette is, and if you don't, once I bring this feather down, it's really essentially going to just darken the edges, and once again, fully customizable, can feather it out, can make that nice vignette without having to do a mask or some vignetting effect on a different node. So now we'll hop to the iPhone clip and talk about the monitor option, which is really cool. You have this clipping indication, which if I go back up to expand and crush my blacks, I will start to see this blue outline. Same with the whites. If I bring those way too far up, I'm going to get this red warning that's just saying, hey, you're pushing the bounds too much. These are totally clipped. So if you're doing that high contrast feel, using the clipping indication will be very beneficial. Now we also have output down here, and that's just going to be the overall effect that your dehancer has on the footage itself. If you made it look awesome and it looks great and then you realize it was just a little too much, you can dial it back right here instead of going into every individual setting and dialing that back. And then under that you have a LUT generator, and then your final tab here is options. While I'm editing, I put it on normal fast so I don't have too much rendering time. But once you come to export, you can change it to high and slow. That's quality and how much performance you're going to get out of your system. So let's talk about some things that I wish were a little different with Dehancer. I've noticed that in all the tutorials I've watched, everyone does input, then film, and then your print. That's the basis of your look. So when all of these are opened up by default, you're just scrolling around trying to, and just going back and forth. I would like to see those in order, or at least be able to customize where they sit. Fun fact, if you hold down Option and hit a drop down, it'll collapse everything. And if you hold it down to bring it out, it will open everything. So fun little tip there. Another thing I'd love to see, not sure if it's possible, I would love to hover preview all of these different profiles for the film instead of having to click through each one to see how it looks, because there's so many, they're so awesome, but it takes a lot of time to go through every single one to see what looky like. I'm sure over time I've already found some of my favorites and I'll be able to quickly find those, but that's another great option they could have is a favorites tab here where you can select your favorites instead of having to scroll through the whole entire list. Now don't go anywhere because I have one great color grading tip whether you're using Dehancer or not, but first I wanted to mention that Dehancer does have some awards coming out soon for colorists and color grading. I don't think I'll be in the running because there are some incredible colorists out there. I'm no pro colorist, which is why I love Dehancer so much, because I don't have to be a pro colorist to get this really cool filmy look. But let's do two color grading tips that are going to make your workflow much easier with or without Dehancer. The first being is I have this first shot here and my second shot right here. I don't have to redo all of that. I don't have to sit here and copy and paste. If you just select your clip and then middle mouse button over the clip that you want to apply the grade to, bam, you've applied that whole entire grade. And even if it's not perfect, you can start to make your little changes. And this next tip is really going to help make sure that in between each clip, the colors are looking accurate compared to the previous clip. Very important, especially when you're working with different cameras. I'm going to open up my gallery and then right click on the clip and go to grab still. Now I'll go to my next clip and I will double click here and make sure that your image wipe is highlighted. Now you have plenty of options here. We can do side to side, and that's going to bring up the previous clip with the current clip that you're editing, and you can just keep clicking and dragging to figure out if the colors are matching well, if there's anything that just kind of stands out and looks weird, and it makes color grading and matching from clip to clip so much easier. But my biggest piece of advice for using Dehancer is to have fun, play with it, especially while you're learning what it can do. You can watch plenty of tutorials and there's 20, 30, 40 different ways to achieve a certain look. The reality is it's a lot better to just play with each section, have fun, figure out what's going to work for the shots that you have, and enjoy the process of making any camera look super filmy and dreamy. And if you're part of the 10 to 20% that make it to the end of the video, please comment down below your favorite thing that makes you get that vintage nostalgia feeling. It could be your favorite older car, it could be an older band, your record player, or your favorite old film. So until next time, toodles.
What?